Looks like Pacific Rim star Charlie Hunnam has recently said he'd actually be up for coming back for Pacific Rim 3, but only if one pretty specific thing happens. Interestingly, that one thing might also fix what most people thought was the biggest issue with the last sequel. Right now, there's no official news that Pacific Rim 3 is happening, and the only person who's really shared thoughts on it is Guillermo del Toro. He made it super clear how he feels in a comment on X, saying he'd absolutely love to see his Jaegers take on the monsters in the bigger legendary universe. So with all that in mind, let's break down everything we know so far. It's pretty exciting that Charlie Hunnam, who led the original Pacific Rim, recently mentioned he'd be open to stepping back into the pilot seat for a Pacific Rim 3. But he did say there's one very specific condition. He'd only come back if Guillermo del Toro was directing. And honestly, that's not just some picky demand. It actually sounds like exactly what the franchise needs to get things back on track after Pacific Rim Uprising kinda missed the mark. Right now, there's no official confirmation that Pacific Rim 3 is in the works, or even that it ever will be. Still, just the possibility of it is enough to get fans hopeful, because it means there's a shot at redeeming what went wrong with the sequel. The first Pacific Rim, which dropped back in 2013, was such a fun, ambitious blend of giant robot action and monster mayhem that it instantly carved out its own spot among the best mecha movies ever made. It's no wonder it spawned a follow-up film and even an animated series. And that's exactly why Hunnam's willingness to return under the right circumstances is such a good sign. Given how he's usually all about exploring different roles and hasn't really done sequels before, it says a lot about how much he loved the original experience and the people he worked with. It also highlights just how much talent was poured into making the first movie. If he's game to come back and the studio can bring in the right team behind the camera, there's a real chance for Pacific Rim 3 to become the epic, heartfelt, pulse-pounding adventure fans were hoping for when they sat down to watch Uprising. Of course, Charlie Hunnam's main condition is that Guillermo del Toro would have to be at the helm again. And can you blame him? Del Toro's direction was a massive part of what made the first movie shine. His passion for kaiju stories, the way he approaches bizarre, over-the-top worlds, and his dedication to practical effects all helped give Pacific Rim a feel that was totally unique. Del Toro's love for these kinds of tales just radiates through every frame, making even the most outlandish ideas feel oddly believable and emotionally grounded. That's actually one of the reasons Pacific Rim Uprising didn't really land for a lot of people. It leaned so heavily into big action sequences that it didn't take the time to flesh out its human characters. Del Toro, on the other hand, always knows how to balance those jaw-dropping moments with heart, giving us weird, lovable, deeply flawed people to root for. So it's hard to argue with Hunnam. If we're getting another movie, Del Toro absolutely needs to be the one calling the shots. Now, is Pacific Rim 3 likely? Well, that's a bit of a mixed bag. The most recent update from Del Toro himself wasn't exactly encouraging. Way back in 2021, he straight up said he had no plans to return to the series. But that doesn't totally slam the door shut, because even though Del Toro doesn't seem interested right now, Hunnam's recent comments show that under the right conditions, he'd be there in a heartbeat. In an interview with Inverse, he didn't even have to think about it. When they asked which past projects he'd like to revisit, he immediately said he'd be down to come back for Pacific Rim. Honestly, anything Del Toro wants to do. He even put it super plainly, I would do anything that Guillermo was doing. If Guillermo invites me to do Pacific Rim 3, I'll be there, or anything else he wants to do. That kind of enthusiasm is pretty contagious. Even though Del Toro is off doing other things, like his new horror anthology series Cabinet of Curiosities and an upcoming Frankenstein movie, just knowing there are key people from the original Pacific Rim still eager to team up again makes it easier to imagine the stars aligning someday. And maybe it's a good thing that Del Toro isn't jumping back in right this second. If Pacific Rim 3 ever happens, it deserves to be done right, with all the care and imagination he's known for. In the meantime, the Pacific Rim universe isn't exactly gathering dust. There's a bunch of graphic novels that have kept the story alive and explored different corners of that world. Some of them, like Tales from Year Zero or Tales from the Drift, go back to flesh out what was happening before or alongside the movies. Others, like Amara, dive into new characters and events. What's cool is that you can pick up pretty much any of these comics without having to follow a strict reading order. They're like these little side adventures that keep feeding fans' appetite for more Jaeger versus Kaiju action. And now, there's an even bigger comic project on the way. Legendary Comics, which is part of Legendary Entertainment, the same folks behind the movies, recently launched a Kickstarter for Pacific Rim Final Breach. This new 3-volume graphic novel is set to continue the story after the events of the first 2 films. It features Jake Pentecost and Herman Gottlieb coming up with one final desperate plan to shut down the trans-dimensional rift for good and stop the Kaiju once and for all. What makes it extra interesting is that they'll apparently need Raleigh Becket back, the hero who disappeared after the first movie, to pull it off. So, in a way, we're still getting more of the original crew story, just through a different medium. Fans clearly loved the idea too, because the Kickstarter blew past its goal super quickly. They wrapped it up with over 1,500 backers pledging more than $200,000, which is a pretty big statement that people aren't done with this universe yet. The first volume is supposed to drop around October 2025, with the other 2 planned for fall 2026 and 2027. Sure, it's not a live-action Pacific Rim 3, but it's still a pretty awesome way to keep the story going. And if you think about it, all this shows there's still tons of love for the Pacific Rim world. From the original film's blend of sci-fi spectacle and genuine human emotion, to the way fans continue to rally around new stories, whether they're in comics, animation, or dreams of another movie, it's clear this franchise has a lot more life left in it. It also means that if Legendary ever decides to pull the trigger on Pacific Rim 3, there's already a super engaged audience ready to show up. They just need to make sure it's done with the right heart and vision, meaning Guillermo del Toro steering the ship and Charlie Hunnam back in the Jaeger cockpit. With that combo, there's almost no way it wouldn't be a hit. Plus, it could finally deliver the sequel fans were hoping for the first time around, tying up stories in a way that's both thrilling and meaningful. So, even though there's no official word on a third movie, there's still so much to be optimistic about. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.